Vice President Harris seized on Donald Trump's bizarre town hall turned concert last night, tweeting a link to it and saying she hopes, quote, he's okay. She's also warning voters that he's dangerous, telling people to take his words, take him seriously.
After all these years, we know who Donald Trump is. He is someone who will stop at nothing to claim power for himself. Watch his rallies. Listen to his words. He tells us who he is. Donald Trump is increasingly unstable and unhinged. And he is out for unchecked power. That's what he's looking for. He wants to send the military after American citizens.
Joining us now, staff writer at The New Yorker and author of Letter from Trump's Washington newsletter, Susan Glasser. Susan, good to have you. It's all about Donald Trump the other day telling Fox News that he might have to use the military in the event of a chaotic election or the aftermath of a chaotic election. J.D. Vance defended that. Other people did as well. But here's what J.D. Vance is saying.
Well, is it a justifiable use of those assets if they're rioting and looting and burning cities down to the ground? Of course it is. There is a core group of far-left activists who are willing to threaten, harass, and commit violence against their fellow citizens. If that happens, if you have a major reaction to an election in 2024, of course you ought to commit law enforcement resources to bring order back to our cities.
It's like the I'm rubber and you're glue defense. Anything you say about me bounces off me and sticks to you. I mean, we saw an insurrection at the Capitol led by Donald Trump supporters who were trying to overturn the election in the aftermath of 2020. And yet J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and other Republicans as well have come around and said, no, don't look at us. It's really the far left radicals on the other side. What's going on?
I think you're right that this is a through line for Donald Trump. And let's be real, that this isn't an idle threat of his to use the military against American citizens. In fact, this was a theme of his in 2020, starting with the summer of 2020 and all the way through the election. Donald Trump was constrained only by his attorney general, his defense secretary, his chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And had those people not been in office, had different people been in office, this is exactly what Donald Trump would have done, regardless of the legality of such a measure. And I think it really underscores the extent to which people are ignoring what Donald Trump is really literally promising to do. And I'm not sure why it is that they continue to refuse to take him seriously on this point, considering this is hardly an idle gaffe.
There's a lot of polling out there that suggests that people want to just move on from January 6th. They think it's spoken about too much. It's nearly half of people, not a majority, but close to a majority, like 46%, who say that it's time to just let it go and talk about something else. Why do you think voters, after 4 years, have said, you know what, I'm done with this. I don't think it's that big of a deal, or at least not a big enough deal to continue to be worried about it? Not all voters, but enough voters.
I think the problem, Katie, is that propaganda works and lies and disinformation. And Donald Trump has not only, was not only the one who incited this attack on the United States Capitol, which in and of itself is something that's never happened in American history, but he has spent the last several years rewriting the history of what happened on that day. He's been turned people who violently attacked our own Capitol into martyrs and heroes and people that he promises to give pardons to, even many of whom have pleaded guilty, people whom he's raised money for, people whom he features in his political rallies. And so, he's built a movement in which his truth must be the only truth, even when it is literally a lie.
Well, why are the Democrats not as good at turning it around on him? I mean, Donald Trump, you're talking about his propaganda, changing the past, rewriting it. Why are Democrats having such a hard time, given that there's actual video of this happening? Why are they having a hard time convincing not half, but a lot of voters that this was a big deal, this was worrisome, and Donald Trump was at fault for it? The
thing that leaps out to me in this election, Katie, is just that it's remember that it's not just the hardcore MAGA faithful who are powering Trump's return and the Republican Party's third straight nomination of him. It's not enough just to have those hardcore Trump faithful. It's Republicans who aren't, who know better, and are doing it anyways. And I think that's the thing that's really concerning, because it's not about facts. In fact, they're saying we didn't like January 6th, this group of Republicans, and yet we're going to go along with him anyways. And I think of people like Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, or Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia. These are not MAGA hardcore, and yet they are supporting Trump, even while recognizing that there are things that he's done, including January 6th, that they don't agree with. And I think, what's the antidote for that in our democracy? When these politicians are saying, oh yeah, that was bad, and I'm going to vote for him anyways. He lied about eating the dogs in my hometown, says Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, and I'm going to vote for him anyways. And so that, I think, is like, it's like a drug resistant problem. It's a truth resistant movement that we're, facing in our society.
And these are the sorts of things that put people's lives in danger. People in Springfield's lives in danger. You got all this misinformation and disinformation about FEMA out there, leading to threats to recovery workers. I mean, these sort of things it's not just campaign rhetoric. It's stuff that gets translated into the real world. And I think what you're saying about these governors, these Congress people, still acknowledging that this stuff is a lie, is wrong, but then saying they're still going to vote for him. It's really hard to explain. Susan Glasser, I'm going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.